Like, that's so shit. Okay. Yeah, I realize everyone can still hear my voice. It's me. Hello. Like, that's so shit. I may as well just turn it on, right? This is minimum level professionalism right here. Let's just. Yeah. I realize everyone can still hear my voice. All right, yeah. Let's just roll. I'm listening to myself as well, which is kind of stupid. Yeah. Hi. There's gonna be a bit of a delay here, but hello. It's me. My name is COPYCATT. Oops. I'm trying to move this window. Yeah. So I'm gonna be breaking down Sweet Soul. I don't know if I should hang out for a little bit and just wait for people to rock up, or if I should just launch into it. Yeah. I might give everyone 5 minutes to rock up before I just like launch in here. I mean, it's a stream, so it's recorded, so it's not gonna be a big deal. But yeah. I realize this is there's like a small group of us. So feel free to drop some introductions. I mean, I suppose we'll be meeting you all at some point anyway. But yeah, okay. So we got Riley. Hello, Riley. I got Owen, Matthew, Kyle, G'day, and Frinla. Son of a bitch. I see what you did there. So yeah, feel free to drop questions at any point during the stream. Yeah, if you've like got specific things, like I'm gonna roll through a few. I made a few notes on things that people sort of asked me about with this track. So I'll probably go through a couple of those. But yeah, if you drop questions in, I'll try and sort of stay on track. And yeah, you know what I'll do actually, I'll just play the track through while I drink my coffee. Shout out Reese for hooking me up with a coffee because I rolled out of bed 20 minutes before my stream. Yeah, mate. All right, let's gear a peep. In case you haven't heard it, this is the mastered version. All right, I'm gonna write down your questions while you ask them. Let's get me notes up. Yeah, also, if there's any issues with sound or if like my voice is a bit quiet, just let me know now. Now would be a sick time. processing on the laugh track. Oh yeah, right. Oh, the actual laugh. Yeah, I'll have a look. Oh, you know, I'll just open it up while it's playing. Yeah, grain delay. I think it'd be the OTT making it sound like all sort of raspy in the top end. I think it was like an iPhone recording, so there'd be like artifacts in the top end, the OTT's just squashing. There's a really dumb sample missing here.
What woman to deplete nuts? Must die is my favorite art. You will have my complete nuts. I've been saving this for 16 months.
I used to put memes at the end of all of my tracks. I try to avoid it now because it's like a trope. Yeah. So this, I feel like, just like some background on the track that's really trivial, but I think I released this track about 3 years ago with Night Owl Collective, which they're putting out a compilation right now. Like they do this thing where they do like a big album and then put out a track like every like 3 days or something like that. I think there's like 70 something tracks in this one. So, yeah, so this is one of them. I do have actually have another track coming out on this Night Owl compilation in April. So, well, it's April now, so in a couple of weeks. Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't have showed my music to people at my school. It was pretty fucking uncomfortable. I did a couple of times and they were like, okay, buddy, turn it down. Except with an Australian accent. It was more like, all right, mate, tone it back. But yeah, okay, so is everyone cool if I just jump in here? Or do you want me to wait a little bit longer? We got people that we're expecting. I know my dad isn't coming to this stream. That was a silly track. I mean, it's the truth, but it's a silly track. Yeah. Alright, look, well, it's been 5 minutes. I'm a late person, so I probably would have been using that 5 minutes being like, fuck, quickly. Except I'm on my computer, I'm not going to be running anywhere. Running through browser tabs. Yeah, alright, so I'll jump in. This idea actually started, like, normally I'm pretty lax with, like, creating ideas. I'll just sit down and, like, make noises for ages and then, like, make a weird bunch of sounds and try and mush them together. This was actually a little bit more linear of a process in terms of, like, coming up with the idea. I literally made a bass riff and a drum pattern and then, like, tried to write a song, which is not, you know, not my normal process. But, alright, I'm just gonna collapse all this shit. This project was way messier. You might be looking at this being like, oh man, that's a fucking mess. How does he coordinate? And I'm like, it was worse. It was much worse than this yesterday. I like went through and cleaned everything up. But this is the bass patch. Pretty crispy saw kind of thing. But it's actually, this is like a thing that people ask me about quite a lot when they ask me about this track is how did I make this? It's actually not super complicated. There's like quite a lot of effects on it, but these are just kind of like polishing it. The actual like core of the sound is really simple. So it's this. I'll just copy this. It's literally, I literally took a sample and just looped a bit of it to get like a waveform for free. I'll turn this filter off. So sometimes if you just get a bit bored of your wavetables in Serum or like Operator or whatever and you just want something interesting, I try this, literally just like snip a piece of waveform from an audio file and just try looping it and see how it sounds. Sometimes you get some really fat sounding stuff. And this, yeah. so that's what I did, and then I put a filter on it. Sounds great, honestly, like that. Just really clean and crispy. And if I chuck OTT on this, what you'll notice, I'll put another one on. So there's two. These two OTTs are pretty much doing most of the work. But you can hear how it's like extracting white noise from the top end. So this is basically the crux of the sound. What it's doing is it's the high end of the OTT is listening to this input being like, oh, there's like nothing here, but I'm just gonna like boost the audio because it's below this upwards compression threshold. And in the process, somehow it's like generating white noise or extracting it. It might be in there somewhere, but there's just like a tiny little white noise artifact in the top end. And then this OTT is like, oh, I can hear a bit of white noise. Let's boost that. And if I kept going, you know, you just have more and more white noise. And then you have this noisy bass. And then what happens is, I'll just chuck some, I think the other thing I put on there was saturator. That just beefs it all up, obviously. Like I said, I know there's going to be a bit of a delay between me and the actual like live stream, so it might take me like 10 or 15 seconds to see your questions, but if while I'm unpacking a sound you have a question about that sound, feel free to just drop it in. I am looking at the chat. This is not like a normal live stream where I'm just fucking around. This is serious. But yeah, so with this sound, when I play with the filter, because now there's high frequencies like because there's high frequencies appearing in the treble, now it's not extracting that white noise because the first compressor is like, oh shit, there's some audio, and it's working with that rather than trying to suck audio out of the treble region. But came out a pretty friggin' crispy sound. Now, personally, I think good waveforms definitely go a long way. Like, I think part of the reason this sound is nicer than like a normal saw sound is just because of this shape. Whatever that shape is, I didn't like plan it, but it just sounds good. No, OTT, like because OTT is just like a preset in this in their like multi-band compression plugin, but you can get something that's very similar. People say it's the same, it's not, but it's very similar, is the Xfer version. So it works pretty similarly. It's actually theoretically better in the sense that there's no, or very little, phase altering between the bands, whereas the preset version on Ableton actually does kind of mess with your phase a little bit. So if you add like a lot of OTTs, you can almost hear like a pluck where the high frequency and then the mid frequency and the low frequency bands kind of operate in order. Like it's like the high frequency is the quickest one. It's weird. You hear this sort of like, anyway, random shit there. But yeah, so there's an Xfer version. They got the guys that did Serum. If you look it up, it's free. So yeah, if you want OTT and you're not using Ableton, you can get it. Yeah, so that's the main bass sound. And then basically how I started writing the song was literally, I just like made this bass riff. I just started. Oh, I got two of these. Hold up. Let's turn that off. So I was like, oh yeah, this is pretty sick. I need some variation. So I was literally like, I was listening to jazz and I was starting to understand really basic conventions of jazz. One being that you can shift the key. Yeah, that just sounds like I don't know what I'm talking about, but yeah, that was my understanding of it at the time. I had like a guitar and I was like, I know that if you're using like, I don't know, a you know, loose enough chord, like not like a super solid tri-hat, you can like shift it up to and it doesn't sound too bad. So this is what I did. I literally just took the whole riff. So I'm just going from D sharp to F. Now there is some filtering going on here. So I'll just close this like main patch. That erosion actually isn't doing much. It's maybe adding a little bit more white noise, but not much. Compressor to keep everything level. And then I've obviously just gone through this slow and steady process of trying to make this bass sound more and more kind of crispy. So I did some like, what have I done? I did some like band separating here just to like kind of adjust things individually. Like I watched like a Cohen Sound, or I read a Cohen Sound interview like ages ago where they were talking about this, where like with basses and like pretty much all of their sounds, they think of the regions as separate. Like there'll be like the sound has 3 parts. It has the treble, the mid, and the bass, and we process them all kind of like just to make them sound good individually, and then when you stack them together they sound better. So I kind of like took a bit of that into my process. So did some, it's not much though, like it's literally like I didn't even end up using this tube. They're actually very similar chains, but I just think I separated them to get more volume out of all of them separately with these overdrives. But yeah, and there's just some really simple filtering there. And then from there, I think I just added drums to it. There's like a few layers with this, but effectively, there's like a real looseness to this groove, and I was actually inspired by this track, which I'll pull up. This was like a big part of like the influence for the style of the track. I'll find it. It's like only on Bandcamp, because I'm really niche and hipster and very cool, and I want everyone to realize that. So the actual groove doesn't start till like halfway through. But there's like, it's got this like real loose, like the hi-hats are a little bit late and the snare is like a little bit early. It has this really cool feel.
I'm gonna purchase, I'ma purchase it all. Been from the lunch till I heard when I call. Learn from the courts while I learn how to ball. Learn how to judge and I learn how to fall. You was burning bridges, we was burning the law. Searching for the sermons and songs. You break with my thought, then you murder my...
So like the hi-hats are a little bit late and stuff, and it kind of has this real loose like bouncing feel, which I was really vibing with. So yeah, that kind of inspired the rhythm for this. So you can see here, like, rather than everything being like bang on the half beat, it's like the hi-hats are a bit delayed. And the snare here is like a little bit earlier. Here's some other tops. I do sweeps with a lot of my drums and stuff, just, well, not a lot. I feel like with slower rhythms, it has a lot more effect. With fast rhythms, like if you're making some like super jittery drum and bass thing, having sweeps between all your drums isn't going to be super noticeable. But when the rhythm is as slow as this one, having these big in your like drums can make everything have a lot more sort of impact and flow. So I got like sweeps here. I've got a couple others. Yeah. That's definitely doing a lot with that snare. Okay, how do you compress your basses? It's different for every bass. I use quite a lot of OTT, but if I'm doing like compression and stuff, usually it's just to like flatten it out. Because like, if you, with like saturation and distortion and stuff, it's all volume based. So if your bass is like flapping all over the place and hitting different volumes, your saturation's going to do that, which sometimes is desirable. Like if you're doing like some real janky phasing Reese bass, you want the different harmonics to be like ducking out and doing different volumes and stuff to get that like nyong, nyong, nyong kind of thing going on. Yeah, if I'm compressing basses, it's usually just to like level them out. Because like at the end of the day, like when I'm mixing it all down and stuff with basses, not that I'm like an expert at mixing, I'm pretty blasé about it. But yeah, when you're mixing your basses, you kind of want things to be pretty level at the end of it. So that's really all I really think about with compression there. It's just leveling things out. It's nothing like super fancy. More of the work goes into like saturation and stuff with basses. So then the next most important part of this track is the sample, like the melodic stuff. So yeah, shock horror, I didn't write all of these chords. I literally just used like weird samples. And I've loaded the actual full sample down the end here so you can have a look at what it was before I made a song out of it. I'm gonna find a blank version of it. Should be alright. Hello? Let's turn this. Loki, I love this artist, Dave Pike. He's like a vibraphone player. He just, I don't know, he's like super spastic. I watched this like rad 70s video from the 70s. Obviously it wasn't 70s theme, it was in the 70s. But I watched this rad video of his like set with this band, and he's like this like real edgy like 20-something-year-old, and he's like, music is like now beyond the point of genres. I think labels are very limiting, but he's like super stoned, and then there's like it cuts to a shot of them all playing as a band, and he's like, and the drummer's like, it's just like so hectic, but he writes really cool riffs. So where I get these samples, Senshin just asked, usually YouTube, honestly. Like, I do have a big collection of like vinyl that I collect, and that's fun. It's like a good hobby, because I've got like a record player and I can sample all that stuff, and I have done with some tracks. But I find, I mean, obviously technology makes things a lot easier, because you figure out with samples like what genres you kind of like to work with if you do a lot of sampling. And for me, I like a lot of sort of like bossa nova, vibraphone sounds, and like more melancholy, chordy jazz stuff. And often I find the best way to get those samples, like initially you might type in the genre. Like I literally for a while was just typing in like bossa nova, jazz, vinyl, 70s. Usually like the 70s stuff sounded the best. But then you find artists that seem to work, and so it's quite hard to do that when you're like actually physically sampling vinyl. Like you end up sort of wandering around the vinyl shop being like, how the fuck am I going to find a 70s bossa nova? Because you go in the genre and you actually don't know what the record's going to sound like. I don't know. It's a novel thing, but I usually just go to YouTube. Delay rack with macros. Yeah. So there's a couple of things going on. I don't think this is that complicated. It's literally just fading in a delay, which I'll try and find the. Hold up. Yeah. Okay. Yes. This is some modulation, and someone was asking about like fills and like resampling. I don't actually have a whole lot of resampling in this project. I have some consolidated bits, so like I chopped up the original sample. So like I've gone and stretched all of this. Not sure where the reverb is here. There's like some grain to it. But in response to the fills and the resampling question, a lot of those sweeps and stuff are from reverb and delay dry wet modulating. So I like we'll make a rack just because it's easier to look at. Like if I'm looking for the control and I'm like trying to, or I've got multiple things linked to one macro, which is generally what it's for. I don't want to like go through the plugin and have to look for the knob that I'm, modulating. I just put at the end of the rack here, and then I could literally get rid of this if I wanted. But obviously I haven't named it. So, but yeah, that's what a lot of that would be. This one I think is just like a normal delay. I guess. Let's have a look. There's like some wild effects going on there. Yeah, so there's a few of those, and if I hear some that are like important, I'll try and go through them. But there's definitely a couple of those. So my process is pretty like touch and go, where I'll just like put a sound in and be like, oh, it needs like a. It's like my brain is thinking that's the actual like verbal process. It's like it needs a. And then there's like another guy arguing with him, but. Yeah, so I'll just like stack effects on, and you can see none of this is organized. It's all just like random stuff just thrown on, and then like some of it I'm like nah, and like turned it off, and there's just like a bunch of OTT scattered in there. But yeah, effectively, I took that vinyl sample, and I would have just layered it with the bass riff to establish what I wanted the sample to sound like, which would be here. There's a pretty cool thing going on here. It'd be grain delay. So there's the effect, the delay rack here. But this delay, this grain delay, is what's giving it that big sort of sparkly. So if I turn that off, there'd be some reverb on there somewhere. Yeah, there it is. So modulating that. It would be smart to just link all of these to one macro, but I haven't done that. I've just like touch and go. But yeah, this grain delay, it's like an octave grain delay because I've got the pitch cranked up 12 semitones. That gives it just like a big sparkle. I'm actually going to bust all of these automation bits out so you can see them. So I've got these moments where I want to like emphasize that chord. Big sparkle. And this is like the reverb here. So I'm using the reverb to kind of sweep into the drums. I did like a little mute here, obviously, to make room for that laugh. I had to actually edit that laugh. It felt really stupid because that's my friend. But to like actually to take her laugh and like pitch down the last one and like edit it to make it rhythmically work, which I don't know, just felt so stupid. That's the original, and then so I actually engineered a laugh for this. I know someone's going to ask me about the neuro-based samples in there at some point, and I will get to them, I promise. Yes. I feel like I've done the same grain delay thing with the... Yeah. I use Valhalla frequency echo sometimes with my sounds because it just is like a really nice sort of metallic echo. This is free as well, by the way. It's pretty fun. If I just... This sound is so silly. This is just like this analog... Oh no, sorry, this... whatever it is. Collision... I forget what the actual name of the... Oh, electric. Doi. But, yeah. It sounds like a trumpet because of the overdrive. But yeah, I love frequency echo. Got some cool parameters. I'm just gonna... Yeah, okay. Glitchy sound coming from the grain delay. I actually don't know how recent this question was. I'm just gonna assume you're talking about this sound. Yeah, this glitchiness. Final Fantasy victory theme. I haven't played Final Fantasy, but if it sounds like this, that's really funny. So again, I'm doing like the grain delay thing here. Just like adds a lot of emphasis when you throw octaves on there. Yeah. Yeah, Valhalla Frequency Echo is free. They're the guys, they do this, actually I feel like there's like a few reverbs that they do that everyone rates. Yeah, Valhalla Room and Valhalla Vintage Verb, everyone raves about them. I don't have them, but yeah, they're really good. Valhalla Shimmer also is really sick, like really washy, like, sort of noisy reverb. It's really, really good for like doing like big like sweeps and stuff. It's sick. Drum processing, good question. So it's a mixture of things. I definitely synth a few things, and I sample a few things. Like I'm never happy with just ripping a sample straight up usually. That's just a personal thing. I don't think it's like this necessary. I know there's like this stigma, particularly with like neuro and really high, like really sort of synthy, sciencey genres. Like you have to make everything from scratch. That's like a stigma. I think that's kind of bullshit. Like you can, I don't know, as long as you're making good music, who gives a shit? But I think it's fun to make your own stuff. So I do that sometimes, and then some stuff I'll sample. I'm pretty sure this snare is actually from a vinyl. It's definitely, like, I've processed it and done stuff to it. Which usually a majority of my process is just EQing, compression, and distortion. This one's got a tube on it, and I think that's just to make it sound more grungy. It just makes it sort of more snappy and bright and crunchy. Yeah. So drum processing can be a mixture of things. I'm so sidetracked so easily. Like, it's a good question, but I realize that people asking me questions about the key sounds again, so I'm just drifting all over the place. This was a synth, I'm pretty sure. I feel like I made a kick and then also made a bass tone. Actually, no, I might have. But anyway, I'm pretty sure that's operator, that one. But yeah, the automation on the key stuff, yeah, that is making it wider. I'm not actually automating a like utility or anything for width. I'm not touching anything that's like actually stretching the width. I'm automating sounds that are creating width. So like reverb and grain delay and stuff, because grain delay is like resampling the sound, like a delay, but it does it with grains. So like little snippets of audio, and then it pans them left and right, so that creates a lot of width, which I find is better most of the time than actually using plugins like, you know, choruses and things that are duplicating the sound on top of itself, like, and like stereo wideners and stuff. But then again, not a lot of my tracks have like a ridiculous amount of width. I think my tracks are pretty mono compared to a lot of other people's. It'd be Valhalla frequency echo. Also, the frequency shifting is stereo. So when you throw that on, it actually like, is it this one? That shifting actually makes it so that it's like the sides of the signal, like left and right, are actually drifting out of phase with each other. It's like frequency shifting them. So if I do like a really extreme example, you can hear the left and right are completely different from each other. But yeah, I see, the thing is, I didn't actually intentionally try to make this mix wider or anything. I just put on sounds that were wide. Like I put on effects that made width. But yeah, that would be with melodic stuff anyway. I find it pretty good to use reverb and like fancy little delays to make width in a mix. But with like leads, like big like plucks or anything super central to the mix that isn't some big washy texture, generally they're pretty mono. And I'll do little bits of stereo processing to kind of just give them a bit more girth, which is just a dumb word for width. I just realized my head's like up the top of this thing. It's because my fucking webcam is on the bottom of my monitor. That's how ghetto this setup is. Alright, I'm gonna drop into basses quickly just because I know someone will be watching this stream and be like, "Can you go to the basses?" So there's a bunch of samples here. Usually what I do is I do like sound design sessions, just like print a bunch of like audio. And then when I'm like making bass phrases, often I sort of will like find a rhythm, or I'll just have a bunch of sounds that I want to use. And I'll like splice a phrase together, And then sometimes I'll literally like resample that or like print that down. So I might just like Control J that. So I print that down to audio. So there's actually 2 basses, possibly 3. I'm pretty sure it's just 2. I've actually taken 2 phrases from the same bass to kind of create a rhythm. And yeah, I'll splice them together so that they're in phase. So I'm not just like sort of randomly fading them together, because otherwise you just get like weird, you know, like little jumps. And if you're listening to that on a subwoofer, you feel like a flap or something like that. So ideally I try to keep the tone kind of like in line. Yeah, so that's often how I approach like writing with basses, is I'll try and find bits of the phrase that kind of emphasize the rhythm. So yeah, I kind of treat them like drums, like they're meant to be rhythmic. So this is there's like 3. It's not just like random sort of like it can be random in the sense that I'll just drop it in and like drag it around until it sounds good, but I'm always looking for a movement that emphasizes the drum. So it's like it's always got like rhythm to it. But yeah, so some of these basses would be, I'm gonna guess, I feel like this one might be massive. This is massive, I'm pretty sure. Obviously I don't have the patch here, but I can tell you that this would be, it would usually be a sub and then a harmonic. So I'd do like the sub frequency, and then 28 semitones above that, there's like a harmonic that is really distinct with like really metallic-y neuro basses. So I'd layer those 2 together, saturate it, maybe like some dimension expander and stuff, and some, you know, just like heaps of saturation and probably some filtering. And I'd volume modulate the frequencies, so you get like sub smashing into the saturator and then harmonic smashing into the saturator, and that's how you get that movement. And then I'd put like a in massive, you can do it like it's pretty common, where you can reset the phase of every oscillator to start at the same point, and then I put like a in the unison section in massive, I should just pull the plugin up, and yeah, I'm just like doing a quick breakdown of this sound because I feel like this is one that I get asked about a lot. But yeah, I would like basically do like sub and then a harmonic. So if I do like plus 28. Oh, let's just reset this. This is basically the idea. It's be. And I'd probably do filtering and stuff in there, but maybe would do another. Oops. Find 2 harmonics that kind of sound like that. Maybe some white noise. And then modulate the volumes of them so you get that ducking, which some people would do with detune because it has the same effect. You get the sounds kind of, the volumes are phasing because they're, you know, out of tune with each other. So then I might like have these go up when the sub goes down. It's just like, it's like a really simple way to just get like a super noisy neuro bass. And then I detune it. So I use the unison, and because all the oscillators are starting at the same point, they're like in sync. And then what you're doing is you're creating duplicate unison voices, so stacking the sound on top of itself. And then when you adjust this pitch cutoff, it's detuning them all slightly, so they all start in phase and then they drift out, so it sounds like this. It has this lasery sound. And then I'll do like filtering and stuff, so I'll like put these in serial. Sounds sick. So that's one thing I do pretty often. And the reason it sounds sort of crunchy, because I'm clipping the output, the detune, I don't know, you're getting like extra saturation after the voices are like detuned and drifting out. I actually haven't made one of these patches in a while. This is like a tried and tested formula I have for making basses. I literally have been making this bass since like 2015. No, fuck, earlier than that, 2013. This is like an 8-year-old bass. Yeah, and there's like all kinds of shit you can do. So I'd like chuck dimension expander on it. Bang, huge width. This is just a fun little thing, but I'm monoing this really quick. I have a little rack on the master that makes life really easy. It's macroed up, so I've got a hotkey to send the mix to mono, a hotkey to hear just the high end, hotkey to just hear the low end, and then a hotkey for a bandpass, which I'll use to like mix a little bit, so I can like sweep through the frequencies and see if there's anything that's just like muddy. And I have that linked to different keys on the keyboard in an area where I'm like not using them for anything else. Just a hot tip, if you want to be producing and just be able to like monitor your output or like check mono and that sort of thing, I have this in my template project so that I just hit the equal button and I get mono signal, which is like super handy. In a newer update of that, I actually did a side one as well, so I have yeah, and then I'll just Command K, link that to this backward slash button. So you can hear mids, sides. I can hear just the bass. I can hear just the treble. This helps you sort of like keep track of like how impactful your track is in every different region, rather than just like hearing that the bass is really punchy and being like, oh, my track's sort of lacking something, but the bass is punchy. So like if you isolate the top end and be like, oh, it just needs some more white noise or something. Anyway, tangent. Yeah, so that's that bass. That's like a bass that I put in a lot of things. So I've definitely got some, like probably got some other wavetable bits and stuff in there, but the essence of the sound is this process. Now I would also have an FM8 bass, I'm pretty sure. Actually, no, this is the... Actually, one thing that I realized, this probably has some filtering on it. It's just a notch, I think. There's also a bandpass on this. I feel like, yeah, okay. So what I'm doing here is I'm putting, there's a bandpass on it, but it's not the whole signal. I've actually got the dry signal in there as well, and it's just so I can get that peak and that valley sound without losing the treble, because there'd be OTT in here somewhere, yep. Which is pulling the treble and the bass back up. So that's something I do a little bit. So I've put those two together. Yeah, that's the same bass. This is an FM8 bass, I'm pretty sure. That's pretty fun. It's complicated, FM8, a little bit, but the crux of the theory behind these basses is just modulating the volumes of different operators going into one main sub operator. So just really quickly I'll try and demonstrate this. So I've got a bass, and then I'll have like this. Let's use like a saw. I'll make like, I'll try and like get a texture to begin with. Let's use maybe a saw. And then what I'll do, you kind of have to, with operator, you kind of, with FM8, you kind of have to do a bit of setup to make it as fun as possible. I'll do, generally with each operator, I'll do key sync, because what that means is the same as in Massive, where you have restart via gate with your oscillators. You can get them to start at the same point every time. That's what key sync is in FM8. You're just starting all the operators at the same time, so you don't get like a random sound every time you push the key. It's like exactly the same. So I'll do that, do tempo sync. So I think, well, you don't have to do tempo sync actually, but then what I'll do is I'll make like a phrase by modulating all these envelopes. So this is D, I'm changing the volume of D going into F. I'll be like, I'll turn slide off so I don't like, because the other thing is with FM8 to be noted is that if you move the end times of these envelopes, then they will loop at different intervals and it'll all go out of sync. So I just try to keep all of these ends in line with each other, which is why I turn slide off. But yeah. I'd probably make this longer, get like more of a loop out of it. And I'll also change the volume of E going into D. So I'm sort of like, this is like one texture that I'm running into F, and then I'm sort of also changing bits of that texture as it's running into F by changing E. So that's sort of the idea. Obviously this isn't a very like good example of what, I'd probably do little bits of stuff like that. And maybe I'll do another one, and I'll modulate some stuff there. Yeah, so that's how I generate tones in FM8 generally, and then after that I'll go and do post-processing. I don't use a lot of the effects in FM8 because they're pretty weird. They're just like weird shit like Torquoise. Hell yeah. Wow. Never use that effect. I never use it. It's just so weird. Maybe like the EQ sometimes. Just to turn the damn thing up because it's so quiet most of the time, like right off the bat. But yeah, usually with FM8 basses, because there's just so much like frequency content in the top end that's just kind of subtly sitting there. OTT, I use OTT pretty. And you always hear artifacts with FM8, but I'm okay with that. And then I'll go and do like more filtering and stuff, pre-saturation. But yeah, you get the idea. Sine compression, not so much. I know Frequent, that's like sort of his thing. And I like the way Frequent does it. Like I really like some of his bass sounds. I think it's like a really sort of natural way to get cool bass sounds, like just using saturation, because I'm pretty sure, like from what he's told me, he doesn't really touch OTT or any sort of compression. And as a result, his sounds are way more upfront and sort of gritty, because he's not doing any sort of volume altering. It's all just saturation. It's all just like natural harmonics being generated on, you know, being smashed into this distortion ceiling. So it sounds really loud and in your face, and then he'll just EQ stuff. I don't do that so much. I think because I like the really squelchy, like multiband compressed sort of sounds. But yeah, I feel it. Like you can, I guess this isn't sine compression. This is glue compression. Unless it is. Like there is that actual sinoid fault. I know Clockvice was into this for a while back in the day, back when we were a squad. It's pretty cool. I actually like M-Wave folder better for this. Does some really cool stuff, particularly with really simple stuff, like just like subs. Like if I just turn off D, get some really cool sound. yeah, there's some cool shit there. And look, with resampling and stuff, like, I generally don't, like, I'll resample maybe to add more processing, but at the end of the day, I could actually just copy all the processing from the resamples and put it back on the original patch. It's just to like sort of declutter. But then in this project, I have done some resampling. When it comes to songwriting, I'll do resampling to like get a certain like movement out of a bass. So in this one, I've got like a, and there's like some reverb and stuff going on here as well, which I'll show in the automation. Dry wet. Yeah, so there's reverb there. There's a low pass filter. There's a high pass filter there. Let's move those. But yeah, effectively what I'm doing with this bass. So that's actually, I'm pretty sure, a resample of what's going on down here. So if I... So literally all I'm doing here, so I've even resampled a resample here. What I've literally done is printed a slab. So let's say I print that. I'll make a sampler and just drop that little chunk of audio in there. So what this is like a Frankenstein of bass phrases. And I'll make like a master phrase, which just sounds better than the parameters being modulated on the one patch. I've just taken like the best of the chunks of basses, merged them together, and like kind of tried to phase align them so they've still got like a consistent sub frequency. And then chuck that into a sampler. I'll like loop it somewhere that feels comfortable. So I'll kind of like crossfade loop it and try and get them overlapping on like really subby bits so that I can align it. The circle of life. And then I'll go and like, you know. And then obviously what I've done with the bass that's in this song is I've done a phrase of that stuff and then pitched that up and down. So this is a resample of a resample. So there's a bunch of that. I've gone and like messed with the patch now, so it's probably gonna sound different in the project. And then I've used reverb here just to give like a big splashy like sweep, because there's a gap in the drums here, I'm pretty sure. So on the snare there's like a big yeah, is it making sense? Is this making sense so far? I feel like this is making sense, but it makes sense to me because I did it. Alright, I'm gonna just like make some room if you guys. I know you guys have been pretty much asking questions the whole time, which has been kind of nice actually. Makes it a lot easier than just like diving in and approaching what I think people want to hear about. Yeah, actually one thing I wanted to talk about quickly, feel free to drop some questions in and I'll get around to them, but a lot of my songwriting process, because like obviously there's a few different sections in this song, so I've got like the main riff, and then like the bit where the keys come in. When I'm writing, I try to initially, before I go through like mixing or anything like that, or trying to like tidy the sounds up, I'll do gradual bits of that along the way just to make it more fun. I have to stop myself sometimes so that I don't get down like a rabbit hole of sound design or like mixing or something like that, because then I end up listening to this little bit of idea over and over again until I get sick of it, and then I've like used up my inspiration juice, if you want to call it that. You have to like stop yourself sometimes. Well, I do. But one thing I'll do when I'm starting out, I'll just try and throw down as many ideas as I can with the one concept. So like this riff, the chord progression, and generate a bunch of different sections. And it might not be as straightforward as like, I made this and then immediately started a new section. Like I'll work on this for a while and make it sound good. But then when I'm like, all right, I've like probably milked this idea enough for now that I need to find some more context to know what this is going to sound like with the rest of the song. So I'll like try and be like, all right, if this is like, I try to like listen to the section and be like, if this is in the song, where in the song would it be? Because I might write the first section I write might not be the first drop or the first thing you hear in the song. It might be a drop that happens, 3 minutes in, because some of my songs are fucking 6 minutes for whatever reason, but I think it's just because I'm too clingy with my ideas. I'm like, but they're all good ideas. It's like make a really long song, but I'll try to be like, where in the song would this be, and then what would lead into this. That's one way I go about it. And then the other thing I might do is literally just take my favorite sounds and make a new thing. Like just have as much fun with the sounds as possible, because there's sort of like this like period when you first start an idea and you realize it's great and you're having fun with it, where you just get all this creative energy and you're like, holy shit, this is so much fun. You've got to like, in my experience, milk that as much as possible. Like just have as much fun as you can and just like extract as many ideas as you can out of the idea when it's in that phase. So that's what I do, is I'll literally like just make a bunch of different sections and have as much fun as I can with the sound. And then I'll be like, oh, maybe I need something more bassy. And then what I've done is I made like another drop. I was like, all right, I probably worked on this for a fair while, like maybe a week or two or something. And then I was like, oh, I don't know if it was a week. It might have been more or less than that. I can't remember. But I was like, oh, this needs like another section, because I can't just like, I feel like it would be stupid to just like take this and restart the whole thing again without putting something in the middle. So I was like, let's make like another drop. So I feel like I actually started this groove without that little like knock, 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 knock over the top, which is actually just a frequency shifted version of the original sample. So there's that sound, and it's just got frequency shifter on it. It's not this one. There's two frequency shifters. One's making like a top end texture. This, I believe, is the one that's doing it. So I'm ring modding it. At what frequency do you cut the sub from your basses? It really varies. Sometimes I don't like to cut the sub because it sounds natural. Yeah, you do lose a bit of headroom sometimes if there's like weird flapping. To be fair, I don't do a lot of pitching on my basses nowadays, like where I just go wildly from like 24 semitones up to 24 semitones below the bass note. I'm not doing a whole lot of that you'll end up with a big bunch of bass flapping. But honestly, I prefer natural sounds to perfect sounds, because perfect sounds aren't really perfect. They're going to be digitally processed and they're going to have imperfections that your ears can pick up on. So I don't like to necessarily high cut everything. But yeah, if there's like a lot of bass flapping and stuff, I'll literally just cut it off until I think it sounds good. I find if you cut really tight with like a lot of basses, if you cut really close to the sub note, you will lose some kind of texture to the sound, particularly when you're saturating it. I don't know. That's just like a little thing I think about. I try not to high cut and low cut everything super tight, because then stuff does just sound digital inevitably. Sometimes it can sound good though, and it can give you headroom, so I'm not going to advise anybody on that. Yeah, do you think the creative part, so this Operculum Audio just asked, do you think the creative part of the track should be completed first before the technical side of things begin? And do you find it possible to go back to the creative side after you've left it? I think depends on what you define as the technical side. If you're talking about mixing and that sort of thing, I think you have a lot more energy. Like the mixing side can be a lot more pragmatic and practical. You don't need creative inspiration necessarily to mix stuff down. There is definitely a creative side to mixing, but I don't find there's as much of a timer on it. Whereas with creative stuff, you only have so much creative juice for a track. And so I find every time you press play and listen to that track, you use a little bit of that juice. So I find, yeah, creative first. That being said, I'm trying to find the balance, and this is something I'm still working on in my process, where when you mix things down a little bit and when you EQ your basses and like sort of beef things up a bit, it can give you a bit more longevity creatively, because every time you listen to your track, you're like, holy shit, that sounds fucking sick. And that's the thing you're trying to work with, is that like moment where you hear your track and you're like, oh, that's fucking awesome. Oh, it needs this. Oh, I got to put this in there. And like, you know, trying to sustain that excitement. That's the idea basically. But yeah, it's a balance. Like I don't think it's this like rigid rule of like, oh, no EQing until I have a finished, you know, idea. It's like, no, you want to make it, the idea is just to make it sound good as efficiently as possible, so you can create as much as you can, because then you can go into the technical stuff and really get nitty gritty with it. But you don't want to be doing nitty gritty shit that's going to take a whole day of EQing kind of thing. Not that I necessarily have the energy to EQ something for a whole day. That sounds fucking grueling. But yeah, that's a long-winded answer to your question. I think creative before mix downs and that sort of thing. Because like I can even go to ideas that I've listened to way too much and just like, you know, I hate it. I can still sit down and mix it down and like, you know, adjust everything, because it's just numbers really. Like a lot of mixing down is just numbers. You're just looking at the spectrum and being like, oh, there's a bit of a clash here, and like, oh, it sounds like there's a bit of a peak here. Like it's all stuff that's very logical and straightforward. Whereas whereas creating is very airy fairy feelings. Yeah. I think everybody experiences that. You run out of creative juice for a track, and so I tend to just try and be as quick as possible when I'm writing. I don't rush anything. Like I'm trying to have fun. Ultimately, the good stuff happens when you have fun, and yeah, sort of preserve moments that happen around that. And so you're trying to cultivate an experience writing that actually allows you to have as much fun and create as much as you can. So one thing I was going to show you was all of this stuff that I've got at the end of the track. So the track actually finishes like here. Oh no, sorry, probably here. Yeah. There's a whole bunch of sounds going on. And then I've got outtakes here. So what these are like sections I created that just, they weren't that great, and some of them are just like, there's also a few plugins missing because this project's pretty old and it was on a different computer, but some of them were just shitty ideas. But so just like, and they'll also be in random orders. Like it won't be a perfect 8-bar thing. It might be like a couple bars of this thing that I had a couple goes at, and then I duplicated it again because I wanted to try like a different variation. So it's just like all these little bits of ideas. So it'll be a random length. This just happens to be 8 bars somehow. Is it 8 bars? Yeah. Yeah, this just happens to be 8 bars somehow, but usually, yeah, this is like 3 bars. Like snare for some reason. Sometimes I go back through my old projects and find like outtakes that I wish I'd put in. Like that could have worked in the song, but what I usually end up with, and like I released a remix recently, like a Flume remix of his track Rushing Back. The full song, before I started condensing it, would have been 8 minutes long, just with that many sections and stuff. And some of them were like, there was like a lot of repetition and that sort of thing, like I'm like reusing of elements, and I was just like fleshing out the flow of the track. And then what I've done is go like, okay, I've repeated this here, I feel like this section sounds better. Like you can literally print it to MP3 at this point, but what I would do is like, I'll have like a massive long track where there's like a drop here, another drop here, a big like breakdown, probably a duplicate of that breakdown after a drop here, and then like I'll literally just go through the MP3 and I'll like probably send it to people as well at this point, but I'll like go through and like chop it up and be like, okay, I feel like this section would sound better here, and then I'll like test it with this build up. Remember I made a major change to this remix where I had like this big section at the end that was really like spacious and like really sort of melodic, and it and my friend was like, you should just use that halfway through the song as like a massive build up to the last drop. And I was like, oh shit. And then I like edited it, just like chopped the MP3 and put it together. Tried it, sounded fucking amazing, and that ended up in the final version. So really, you're writing, like it's kind of risky, I think, to just jump straight into mixing down the idea, because you're using that creative juice and slowly getting towards that point where you don't like your song anymore, which is, you know, just a part of the process, I think. Like, and eventually you stop listening to it and come back and you like it again. But you want to just smash out your ideas and not try and control the final product. You just want to milk that creative juice as much as possible, generate a bunch of sections, and just get all your ideas out. And then you can go back later and refine them and change the arrangement and change where your transitions are. Yeah. Okay. More questions. Do you ever reach a point where you feel the track needs something more, but you don't know what it needs? If so, how do you approach that? I definitely have that. Oftentimes I try to actually, it's funny, I nearly unpacked my Rushing Back remix today because I had this problem, really, really full on, where I made most of the track was like all the melodic stuff in the intro and working with the verse and the vocals. So I like made this big kind of, not a suite, I don't know, that sounds really wanky, like I'm trying to be Hans Zimmer or something, but like, I made everything before I made the drop. And so by the time I got to the drop, I was actually pretty sick of some of the elements. And I was like, and also there was like just shit everywhere. And like the project was in this state where everything was like EQ'd and there was like compression and bussing and stuff. And like, it was just so hard to start a new idea. But often that's the way I find is best. If you're stuck for ideas, literally take the sounds and make a new idea out of it. Like I try to work in the same tempo and key, obviously, so you can transpose it. But even then, like if you make an idea that's good enough, you could literally just like reintegrate it with the project. But the aim is just to reboot that like fun that you're having with the sounds. So what I would do, yeah, I could open it up. I've got a time. Actually, yeah. But what I did with the Rushing Back remix I did, I literally took the sounds, so I got them down into groups like this, so it would have just been like the intro. So imagine I just had this. I just printed those into stems, and then I started a new project. And then I used those stems to create a new drop, and like just chopped it all up. So I had like resample. It was almost just like starting from scratch with stems, which is a really good way to start. It's like, it just gives you a huge boost and you're not having to mess around, and like the project's not slow because there's not shit tons of plugins on it. So that's a really good way to reboot if you know your project needs more ideas, particularly like if you know it needs a completely different new section, like yeah, print to stems, new project. The reintegration process can be a little bit annoying depending on how you go about it, whether you're putting the new drop back into the old project or if you're just leaving the samples and as they are and then just using them in the new project. I didn't. What I did with this remix is I literally basically had two versions of the project merged into one. I took all the old samples and put them into the, took all the new samples from the drops and stuff and put them into the old project, and then I was like literally turning tracks on and off. But that was fine. Like that actually worked. But yeah, so that's a really good way to reboot stuff. Literally just like try and start a new idea and then see how well you can integrate it with the original thing. You might even turn your song into a new thing, which is fun. Like there's no real end goal necessarily. You know, you're just like having fun and generating an idea. So I hope that answers that question. Other ways I might approach, like when you get to a point when your track needs something, you don't know what it needs. Reference tracks. That's another thing that I find is really good. They don't call me Copycat for nothing. Nah, like, I don't know. I don't have any shame in like looking at other people's tracks and being like, particularly if it's in a similar style. I don't know what I'm going on Spotify for. Like there's no track I'm going to reference right now, but like I'll think about sort of, it doesn't have necessarily, your reference tracks don't have to be necessarily tracks that are similar to what you're making. But if they create a certain vibe that you want to have in your track, go and look through it and be like, okay, what sounds are they putting in there to kind of make it sound like that? So if I'm making drum and bass and, you know, my drums are driving, but it's just lacking atmosphere, I'll go and look at, you know, some drum and bass producers' tracks and be like, okay, what are they putting in their atmosphere? What sort of like transitions are they using? And just like gather some ideas as to what I can do and then literally just try that. Because I find the hard part with producing is sort of approaching ideas in the first place. It's not like, once you know what you want to do, it's not super hard to be like, all right, I know I want to like saturate this, and you just, you know, once you've got your direction, you kind of just go for it. And that's why mixing can be pretty straightforward, is because you know you want it to sound good and you want to remove harshness. Oh, I'm so tangenting right now, but like, yeah. Reference tracks. Reference tracks are a good way to reboot your ideas as well. Just try other people's ideas. See how it goes. You might think it sounds a lot like them until you actually hear the final result and you realize you're just emulating your interpretation of somebody else. Okay. Yeah, Master Bus channel. Yeah, are we happy to move on there? Does anyone else have any songwriting questions? Because I'm more than happy to answer those. I think there's a lot of the challenge of creating is actually the process and the workflow more so than the techniques. It's actually like maintaining an environment where you are having fun and creating and getting as much out of your own ideas and inspiration as possible. So if you got more questions, drop them in. Moving on to master stuff. I literally just copied, so all this stuff was on the master, but I just, for the sake of this demonstration, I dropped them into a bus just so that this demonstration version of the track wasn't going through all the master plugins twice. It's pretty loose here. Like I've literally done an EQ and then be like, I need some more EQ. I'm just gonna see what it sounds like with like a bit more bass. All less trouble. I've like done 2 EQs. I remember I did a track when I did Tom's Battery with Nolan. He was looking at my EQs and he's like, what the fuck are you doing with your EQs? You've got like 3 EQs doing tiny bits of things. Yeah. But yeah, it's not too complicated. Multi-band compression. That's probably just the preset. Literally just gone into multi-band dynamics and gone, plop. Let's see how similar it is. Okay, yeah, I've like adjusted the outputs, but all of the shit is pretty much the same. Crossovers are the same. The amounts dialed back a bit. It's just like, because at that point I wasn't really learning too much about mastering. I was just like, just make it sound a little bit better. And it's like put multi-band compression, a little bit of saturation and limiting on there. I didn't even own any limiting plugins. I don't really anymore. I don't really now either. I just own Pro L. But that's it. Yeah. So there's nothing really complicated, and I'm by no means very good at like mastering. I have some theories on mixing now. I don't know why I had to group that just now. It just felt right. But yeah, I don't have any sort of complicated advice. Not related to this track in terms of mastering. In general, I literally just try to keep things flat, try to keep the transients popping out, and then just, yeah. But this like mixing stuff, I don't know. Transitions. Man, it's so by feel, that one. Oftentimes, I find it's cutting things out. Reverb tails as well, effects sweeps and that sort of thing all make for good transitions. Is Tom's Battery named after Vorso? Yes. Yeah, Tom Slattery. That's his full name. Go and find him on Facebook and tell him I told you his name and ruin his life. I'm sure most of you knew that anyway. But yes, it's named after Vorso. Because we got him in a Skype call with like, we had Clockvice and we had Refrac. That's how you say his name. I've always wanted that. Pretty sure it is. We had a bunch of us in a call. I think Hudson Lee might have been there as well. Literally because we wanted Tom Slattery samples. We just like got him in a call and didn't tell him why. And I just recorded the whole thing. And then I sent Nolan the audio file and he like went through it and made a Tom Slattery sample pack. Yeah. Anyway, so that's, yeah. All liquid drum and bass is just boring as fuck. Transitions. Look, honestly, I find like cutting sounds out before moving into another section often is a good way to transition. Big silences, this like sort of generic stuff that you'll hear, you know, like just removing elements for a little bit. Even like removing the first kick is one thing that just creates a bit of excitement. So kind of a bad example there because it's like a big sub hit there, but like but yeah, that's like one thing I like to do. It's just like I feel like transitions are just like a little like library of tricks that I've accumulated over listening to other people's tracks and trying stuff out. I find ultimately I like to establish my sections before, because transitions are just relationships between sections. So I try to establish sections that I want to be next to each other before I start messing around with transitions. and then I think about how do I want this to feel leading into this next section. But like I said before, where I like make a bunch of sections and make like an 8-minute long song, I'll end up with duplicates of sections. So I'll have like this drop and then this drop again somewhere else in the project to see how it feels before a particular section and after a particular section, and then I'll mess around with transitions and that sort of thing. So imagine if the song started with this, you know. You know, I'll like mess around with that sort of thing. I don't know if that actually answers your question there. I don't have any really pinpoint advice on transitions. Best thing I'd recommend there is honestly just like listen to other people's tracks and you'll learn things, and experiment with tails and dragging sounds across the beginning of the next bar of the next section, and like bringing in sounds a bit early. I think one thing is like hinting at stuff. So I guess like you could apply some of the science you would use to write intros to transition ideas. So like what sort of stuff do you do in the intro of a track to kind of introduce concepts before they appear, and then use that same technique for later in the track when it's like I've got another section coming up that I want to introduce before people hear it to create excitement. How do I sort of introduce those elements prior? Those are some of the theories I might use, but yeah, I couldn't give you any pinpoint advice there. Just like listen to other people's tracks and take notes. Do you ever consider DJs and the playability of your track when creating the arrangement? For sure. Yeah, I think context is a massive part of songwriting. Like, what's the track for? Where are you going to listen to this? And this is one thing that I, particularly in my first like 3 or 4 years of writing songs, an issue I ran into a lot was how I was like writing my songs and the context I was writing them in. And this is something I'm still growing in a lot, is like some tracks that sound amazing sitting in headphones listening on the train or on the bus don't sound amazing on a stage in front of 1,000 people, you know. It's a different thing. So like I don't really vibe, you know, say with Steve Aoki's tracks, but on a festival stage they probably fucking bang because they're really straightforward and simple. I think Mr. Bill is a really good example of someone I think who's like figured out context, because some of the tracks he writes I can tell they're written, well, they feel like they're written for headphones and, you know, an environment where you've got space to actually listen to stuff, because they're really detailed and really clicky and the mix is really textured and nice. And then he's got some absolute thrashes that are really simple, like the drops will just be like like rhythm virtually. Particularly recently he's done a few tracks like that. And I was like writing tracks with him. There's this one collab I have with him. I have one collab with him. There's only one. But there's a track I wrote with him, and the first version had like a whole bunch of neurofills I put in there. And he took them out, and I was like, why are you doing that? You know, like I like these neuro basses. They sound good because I'm listening in headphones. And he's like, it's just too complicated, and like there's just like a lot of random neuro stuff going on in there. And I didn't get it at the time. This is a few years back, and now like a year or two later, listening to that collab and what he did to it, I was like, I get it now, because he was making stuff that would sound good on a big system. It was just like big fucking distinct massive bricky sounds. Fuck, I get so like sidetracked with my responses there, but yeah, I totally consider DJs and the playability. But really, like, you want to think about what you want to do with the track and how you want it to be experienced. So, like, if you're not writing a track that you know, are going to play, you know, someone's going to play on a big fucking festival stage, don't worry about it. Like, just write how you're going to enjoy the track the most. The point is to just have fun, I think. But if you're writing, big festival bangers, I would focus on, you can have complicated elements, but have your core elements be simple and audible. I learned eventually, after like 4 or 5 years of just not really paying much attention to the low end and not monitoring my stuff on speakers, I eventually learned, oh shit, my stuff sounds pretty dodgy on festival speakers because my sub hasn't been considered. Like, I have to think about having simple, punchy sub notes. So yeah, they're things I think about when I'm writing. Isabel said something was too complicated. Yeah, he's a fucking mad scientist, but he knows what he's doing, and yeah, he knows when to use simple and when to use complicated, I think. No, Mr. Bill's a smart guy. I love you, Dad! Yeah. I'm trying to think. I feel like that's a really good question in terms of like considering context for your tracks. But yeah, it'll vary. I think one thing that's really fun, this like idea that I've had, I'm totally tangenting here, but I don't give a fuck, is that your track is like, a track isn't the exported finished wave file. It's not the exported copy. It's an idea that's just like, it's just like a concept with a bunch of different branches. So I think it's good, like now I'm really learning to organize my projects enough that I can go back to them, because having live edits, it's like you're not trying to make a better version of the track. You're just making, if you do a live edit or you do an edit for DJing or you do an edit for listening, they're just different iterations of this really cool idea, and all you're doing is extracting the most out of it. So don't like think of your song as the exported MP3, the one that you're putting on SoundCloud. Just think of it as an idea, and the iteration, there's an iteration that you're putting on SoundCloud or Spotify, and then there's an iteration that you use for your tracks, which might be, that you use for your DJ sets, which might be like, starts off with a particular section in the middle, has a simpler drop. Yeah, I don't know. Don't be rigid about it. Like, you can literally go back and change your ideas later. Don't stress if you want to have a version that's listenable on Spotify and stuff. You can always go back and do like a DJ version, because it's going to be simpler. Anyway, yeah. That's my tangent there. Context is important, but your ideas aren't rigid. You can go back and alter them. Oh man, sometimes I'm just like a fucking floodgate. Like I just like get stuck on a topic, and I'm like, I gotta say everything I want to say. Sneak peeks to stuff. You know what? Because this isn't a Twitch stream, I feel like that's probably okay. I do have one project that I'm really enjoying. The one thing I think, don't like. This is just like purely out of respect. Don't like download this and rip it. Obviously, there'll be like a copy of the stream that you can watch, but I'll show you a track that I've been mucking around with a little bit. Oh, I feel weird about this now. Actually, I don't know if this breaks my philosophy. I think there's actually something to be said, or maybe I shouldn't. Yeah, I think actually, no. All right, look, I'm going to stick to Sweet Soul for a little bit. If I show you this project, I feel like it might alter how I'm thinking about it. Because I think there's a thing, this is something I used to avoid like the plague, was like, until I'm really happy with my idea, I don't show anybody. Because once you've had somebody else's input, it changes how you see your song, which I think is dangerous. So, I'm having second thoughts about actually showing you a demo. How do you chill the fuck out from worrying about too much? I have no idea. I have no idea how to chill the fuck out from worrying too much about what to do with your music. Major weakness of mine. Seriously, like I have so many demos in the graveyard that I don't finish, literally just because I wanted them to be perfect, and I don't want to release them until they're perfect. But I don't know what that is. I don't know what perfect is, and I don't know what the context is, and so they just sit there. Like that's a massive I'm sure it's promising to say anything nice about it. Well, that might hurt me as well. Fuck. I'm considering this. Let's roast your whips. I can maybe show you older stuff.
You're not better than them, man. Funny thing is, I actually am.
That's all you get. Alright. I'll show you a tiny bit. Show you a tiny bit. I'm so conflicted about this.
Message received.
Alright, just let it be known that I don't necessarily think it's a good idea to show you people your ideas when you're not finished with them. Just the tip.
rifle number. Deep when I stop like they no bumper. I need two holes in your umbrella jumper. Carry on talking my name, younger. You'll get sparked with the flame. Look, yeah, what are you under? Island rival, 6 feet under. Yeah, 6 feet under. Man tried jump in the ring with a lyrical warlord. I was like, what are you under? Yeah, what are you under? Must have been smoking crack with jumper. Okay, I make the 3-8 bang. This shit man can't fuck with an M. What you can't do, I actually can. I'm actually big, I'm actually bad, I'm actually fucked, I'm actually mad. And they're like, you're not better than them, man. Funny thing is, I actually am.
Actually, speaking of Chi, I figured out he used this acapella in one of his tracks. So I've like, I put like an effect on the particular part that he used as like a little like, I use this bit. I think we just look up the same grime acapellas.
Man should know that I do this hard.
Alright, there you go. Here's a track. I can show you shit that other people have seen already. So like, this is my collab with Bill. We didn't edit this. She dropped a track in the middle of the stream. I feel like if this is the one, because I'm on a slightly different time zone, I feel like it might be the one that I saw from him yesterday. Yeah, Bloodthirsty. Boo. Boo. Sick. It's good. You can go listen to it. Show you a bit of this. Intro is pretty dry. Balls. I'm gonna be rude and skip a section of this. Haven't worked on it. I'll do it again. This is Bill's bass, it's so fat. Yeah, we haven't released this. This is something like literally the first iteration of this is probably 2 or 3 years old. Similar age to Sweet Soul, I think. How to mix. Yeah. Anyway, fucking yeah. Trying to think. Okay, so Sweet Soul isn't hard to open. If anyone's got more questions about Sweet Soul, I don't know if I'm gonna like do a breakdown of it for a fair while. So yeah, if anyone has like more questions on that side of things, I'm happy to go back. And I'm not in a hurry to end the stream, so if you have other vague, unrelated questions, I can briefly touch on them. knowing me, I'll probably get super sidetracked. But yeah. Otherwise, I will pull the plug pretty soon. I will unplug my computer from the wall. That's how I end my streams, is I just like pull the plug out. Oh fuck. I don't know why I find that so funny. It's so goofy. You just like unplug the computer from the wall. Oh. Okay, I'm probably the only one laughing at that. Can you make a neutral bass, a nutritious bass? Maybe. I make a neuro bass every single stream, so if you want to see me make basses, literally just go to my Twitch channel. Actually, no, just type in COPYCATT Twitch stream on YouTube. There's a dude who, for some reason, like uploads all of my streams and a bunch of other really good streams. He uploaded Shades, so Alex Perez and EPROM did a stream. He uploaded Cursor streams, Habstract. I was looking at this yesterday. So there's this one dude that uploads like mad streams, and mine are on there also. So yeah, if you want to see neurobasses, jump on that. Do I have a routine before I start producing? No, but I have things that I do that definitely make it more fun. Like I have things that I do that cultivate fun and creativity. One is I have a laptop, this MacBook Pro, and I literally take my headphones and my mouse and my laptop to a cafe and I'll write, and it's really productive sometimes, like much more productive than being at home. Sometimes it's just because it's scenic, sometimes it's just because like I'm out of the house, I feel like, you know, anything is possible, like something could happen. Whereas like when you're sitting at home, I don't know, like I find sometimes it's harder to get inspired because everything's just so predictable when you're sitting in your room. Like you can, I don't know, you can get all bummed out and depressed just by sitting there for long enough. Whereas like being out and about, having a laptop, you know, you're just sitting at a table in some random place and you just start writing. I don't necessarily believe you have to have an ideal monitoring environment to write a good track. Like fucking Dr. Dre and Kanye West will use, you know, Beats headphones. Obviously Dr. Dre would. Maybe he wouldn't. That'd be really funny if Dr. Dre doesn't use Beats. He probably doesn't. But yeah, look, like I think get your shit and go and sit somewhere interesting. Right, that's a really good one. Exercise, not that I'm like some fucking gym lord. Just like some stretches even. Like just like a tiny bit. It's like annoying, I know nobody wants to hear this, but just like a tiny bit of exercise can like just, I don't know, make you feel way more awake. I drink coffee. Bits like that, like literally just like eating properly and those sort of things. I know they're little annoying things, but the happier you feel when you sit down to begin with, the more likely you are to have a good session. Like don't, not to say that I don't sometimes just like roll out of bed and slump myself in my chair and start writing a track. I've written some cool tracks doing that. That's how I started my Rushing Back remix. I just like woke up and I was like, I'm gonna try and fucking make a remix. Yeah, stream at full book. Oh, that's just so funny to me. He just doesn't close anything down, he just fucking pops out of the wall and walks away. Oh, jeez. Okay. Oh, that's ended me, okay. I don't have much other advice. Eat healthy. I think it's good to eat healthy. You'll feel better. Have lots of protein and good fats. Fish oil tablets, multivitamins. Just like take care of your brain, you know. Yeah, it does suck. Cafes are closed at the moment. It's hard for me. I just get a takeaway and like find somewhere weird to sit. Get like a takeaway coffee. And like I'll sit on the Brisbane River with like my feet dangling over it and just like have like a book with me so I can put my mouse on it. I don't sit too, you know, you don't want to like drop your laptop in the water, but you get what I mean. Like just like go out and do fun shit. Don't like try and be perfect about your producing environment. But Dr. Dre uses skull candy. He uses like Sony $20 earbuds or like clip and they have no bass. That's why his bass is like his bass on his tracks is so loud, is because he's like, I can't hear any bass. don't know why he's southerner. I can't hear the bass. Hey guys, it's me, Dr. Dre. Yeah. Yeah. How do I think about mixing and mastering? Interesting. Good question, actually. Like, I used to hate this question because I didn't have any ideas. But I think I actually have a project that kind of demonstrates some things that I've been doing. I won't go into too much depth because it can get long, but there's definitely a couple of things I look for with mixing. I am by no means a mix lord though. Like, I feel like if there was anyone I could ask this question, it would be like Noisia. And Noisia do have videos on mixing and they're really good. Definitely go worth a watch. I'm assuming there'd be a few people here that have already done that. I'd love to ask Alex Perez about his mixes. Obviously, Cohen Sound, their mixes and their sound design in general has just gotten more and more pristine as the years have gone by. So this project is just like a big fucking test of like my theory and shit. But yeah, effectively, there's a couple things I look for in mix. It's all just tetras, basically. So there's two things. Let's just get span. I don't even need span right now. I'm not actually going to do any mixing, but the two things I look at are spectrum. So your sounds in relation to the spectrum, and your sounds in relation to time. And they're the two things that you're trying to perfect. And for me, it's Tetris because it's about cutting holes for the things that you want to hear, and making them more audible and visible by cutting space out on like in the time. So making like audio like windows for sounds, which is what sidechain is for me. Like literally having my audio duck enough for my kick so that it's silent for a little bit. And you know, like with my snares, having like sidechain ducks that are like full cuts. I know Chi does this as well. He'll do just like a real fucking huge 0 to 100 sidechain cut, which I can show you here. Like literally with this project, I've got my sidechain rack set up, which I'm not going to go into. I've done that on streams as well. If I mute my drums, and if I resample this, this is what my sidechain looks like. It's literally a huge hole. There's nothing going on there. And these were if you look at where the drums land, it's like just these perfect holes. And my kick would end about here and it just fades perfectly. So that's their mixing. Like, I don't know, mastering for me, I guess, is not that I think mastering for me is still a bit of a gray area. Like, I don't really have like strategies on it, but I think some of that is just to do with subtle like level adjustments to make sure that it sounds good on everything. So you're not like mastering is something I reference a lot on other stuff. So I'm not having any weird peaks and I'm not like catering to a particular speaker sound. Trying to glue shit together. So just like compressing shit and saturating shit, and making sure your transients pop. They're things I look for in mastering. But yeah, the other thing with mixing, obviously I pay attention to, is obviously the spectrum. So I don't know where I put span, somewhere here. But yeah, the other thing with Tetris, that Tetris concept is on the spectrum, is cutting holes for, oh yeah, right there. I'm making sure that there's room for my kick. So finding like the ideal frequencies. So if my kick's peaking at, I don't know, like 200 hertz or something, and then there's like a tail on the kick, which is around 40 hertz or 60 hertz or whatever, it's kind of paying attention to those specific key points, and trying to highlight those and then cut out areas where you don't really need frequencies to make room for other sounds. I try not to get too surgical with my EQs because I think sometimes it can taint the sound. Like you kind of want to use your ears a little bit as well. But then like this whole concept with Tetris, with my bass, if my kick's got a peak around 200 and a peak around 60, I'll try and make sure my bass doesn't have too many, like doesn't have peaks that kind of interfere or overlap, because I find the more space there is in a spectrum for one particular sound to come in, the more impact that sound has. So in an exaggerated sense, let's say my whole track is just fucking bass and treble, and then I have this one pluck in there that's all mid-range. It's just doo doo doo. That pluck is going to be so in your face. Whereas if I have like a bunch of sounds going on in the mid-range and then this pluck's in there as well, you know, they're going to be fighting for space. And so spectrum, you can make everything fucking stand out by giving it room on the spectrum. So just cutting holes, basically, if you want to take it really simply. Yeah, that's my basic advice on mixing and mastering. I could talk about sidechain. Sidechain is something that I really kind of fuss over. And then bussing, that's the other thing I do. I've been doing that a lot lately. It makes life so much easier. It's just having everything sent to buses, so I can think about things in groups rather than trying to mix every individual sound, which I do as well. Like I will like mix my sounds so that they kind of all glue together nicely, and I'll be like, oh, if there's a really loud sound in a particular section that's interfering with something else, I'll look at them individually on the spectrum. But I also like to think about things in groups in bigger blocks, and then think about doing sort of subtle changes to each big block to make them fit together. So I'll have like all of my effects in one thing, all of my melodic stuff in one thing, my drums in one thing, my bass in one thing, and kind of think about processing those together to make these big chunky components that glue together really nicely. In this project, I've just got drum and not drum, which is one way of looking at it. If you're just making bass music that just wants to be loud and fucking intense, drum and not drum is a good way to look at it. But there's also effects. You might not want to squash the shit out of your effects. You might not want to, you know, if you have like, I don't know why I'm doing MIDI channels, but you might have a bus that's like vocals because you don't want to sidechain the shit out of your vocals. Otherwise you won't be able to hear like the consonants. So I have them, you know, without sidechain, stuff like that. Do I write into a limiter? Now I do. Yeah, a little bit. Mainly for my buses, not for the master. I try to go without master limiting nowadays. I don't know if that's a good strategy. That's just what I've been doing at the moment. I just have like a limiter, or if I want to be more like, not hard on myself, but if I want to be more conscious of how much volume I'm giving everything, instead of running into a limiter, I'll run into a saturator, or like not like a full fucking, you know, curve like that, but maybe just like a little one. So like at the top of the volume region, there's a little bit of saturation, so that I know when I'm gaining the fuck out of something and it's starting to clip, just so I can be conscious of it. And then I might do a limiter after that for whatever reason. I don't know, just because it feels nice to guarantee flatness, even though it's just so not necessary. But yeah, so I might mix into saturate, like right into saturation, so that I can hear when stuff is distorting, for my groups. I have my sidechain set up and ready to go every single time, just because it's something I'm always fucking using. I can always turn it off. I can always dial it back. But there's like pretty much a 90% chance that whatever track I'm writing, I'm going to use sidechain, and I'm going to not want to fuck around with it because I know exactly what I want already. And I have like a MIDI setup for my sidechain. Drum tuning, that's a good question. I'll finish sidechaining. I have some MIDI triggers for my sidechain. That's what I was going to say. But drum tuning, probably something I would pay attention to. I don't really think about it in terms of... Oh, actually, no. I think subconsciously with my snares and stuff, I'll think about like what note the fundamental is with my snares, because it's in a melodic region, like because it's in the mid-range, it's kind of in those melodic elements. I might think about that a bit. One thing I pay attention to more so with my kicks, I think you could tune them and maybe that would make sense. Again, these are areas where I don't think it's right and wrong as much as you just make progress and remember what sounds good. But with my kicks, I don't necessarily tune them to a note, but what I'll do is I'll just pick a kick that sounds good and make sure it phase aligns with the bass. So see with this, how it kind of fades in. There's no like weird fluttering or anything going on with this transition here. It's almost like it's one big note. I'll show you like another example. Actually, do I have... Let's just see if I've got Meat Grinder. So this is one of my other tracks. I actually don't have it. Have I got Shorty? Fuck. There's an Ivy Lab track. Bend it over. Shouty, bend it over. But a lot of those really nice, like tracks that have nice bass, what they do is they either the sidechain and like the phase alignment of everything is so tight that it all just like merges together really nicely, or they are one thing. But I make sure that my kick leads perfectly into my bass, because when you listen to it on a sub, rather than it being like like the sidechain is like this little kick and then a gap and then bass, it's like this perfect like this big impactful envelope. So I try to focus on that rather than necessarily tuning my kicks. But that being said, if adjusting the pitch of your kicks can help them align better with the bass, so I'll do that. Do I synthesize my own drums? Yes. Not always. Like, I'll use samples and stuff as well. But that being said, I think synth drums are a really good way to get clean and crisp transients. I like having interesting tails, so a lot of my snares and stuff will have like weird shit going on, you know, on the tail. So there'll be like, there's like a clap sample on there probably, and maybe like a vinyl thing going on. That's literally got like a fucking DC pop in it, which is disgusting. but yeah, so that, like, even in the tail you can tell there's got weird processing and like probably a hi-hat in there. But a lot of the time, the transient of my snare, there's a good chance that it'll be synthesized, because it just pops so much through the mix. If you listen to like noisier tracks, Noisier are a great you know, band to like learn mixing off of, because I think in a conceptual sense of like clear-cut mixing techniques, they've got it on point. Like, they just have everything figured out in terms of like, well, they're leading, you know, they don't know everything, obviously. There's always going to be more to learn and people will pioneer new techniques, but I think they're leading in terms of mixes in some ways. Bill also is really good. Dialing in phase transition and what you're looking for. Look, it's pretty simple. Effectively with this, all I'm trying to do is get the tail of my kick, even sometimes with my snare I'll do the same, but probably more so just kick, get the tail of my kick to align with my bass. So a couple of ways I'll go about it is with delay. So I might literally just use like a delay plugin to, like, just with full wet up, no feedback, just to push the bass forward or back a little bit. I find resampling or having an oscilloscope helps a lot. There was this mad plugin I found called Oz. Yeah, this one. My trial ran out, which sucks. But this is such a mad plugin. Look it up. It's literally like can give you multi-lane synchronized oscilloscope feedback, so you can see like multiple tracks like this, like you were printing to audio, except you don't have to print to audio. You just literally put an instance of the plugin on every single lane that you want to see it, and then you look at them all in front of each other and they just like line up perfectly. But yeah, the ultimate technique that I'm going for, like, or the thing I'm trying to do is literally just shift this bass so it's in phase with my kick. So if it's like here, obviously when I resample this, it might flap a little bit. Actually, I've got my delay on here. Sorry. Let's get rid of that. Might flap a little bit, whereas if I line it up, I feel like this might not actually be. Yeah, actually, that sounds worse. There's probably like some processing on there that's making that delay a bit. But yeah, look, effectively, you might only have to do little shifts. I find customizing your sidechain to good settings actually gets this happening a little bit better. So having it so your oh, I know what's happening here. I'm fucking resampling this channel. What was I? Just having your sidechain like mapped so that they overlap nicely. So see what I've done here? I've made it so that there's a little bit of overlap between my kick and my bass. And it might not be perfect, but it's enough that the printed audio comes out as like a nice little clean brick with no like audio peaks or anything like that. Yeah. So it's sidechain triggering. Gatekeeper would probably do a similar thing. I'm using Shaper Box. And I just draw my own sidechain curve. There is also a compressor on this. This is a complicated sidechain setup. I won't go into ridiculous detail, but basically the compressor is literally just covering up this little envelope of attack here. Reason being is that if you do a double kick, so say your sidechain isn't actually finished triggering and you trigger it again, you're going to hear this little click here. You're going to hear this little in your sidechain signal, because it's actually triggering that envelope. Halfway through this silence here, you're going to hear a little stab. So I've got a little compressor here to cover that up. Cover that little stab up. I'm covering up my stab. Yeah, anyway, that's sidechain. Oh, yeah. Well, here we go. We got sidetracked. Very nice. We got sidechain tracked. Mad dog. I feel like I've covered most of the things I wanted to cover. Most of which were related to Sweet Soul, which we're no longer talking about. Yeah, no, I'm just talking about sidechain again. This is like, I feel like this is like the bottom of the sink for me in terms of topics. Like, everything leads to sidechain. This is what I'm thinking about a lot. But yeah, all right. One more question, and then pull in the plug. Unless no one has any more questions, in which case I'm just gonna pull the plug out of the wall. Yeah. Otherwise, thank you all so much for thank you all so much for hanging out. I don't know when pitch the retreat is gonna be, but I'm really excited for that. I'm really excited to actually like hang out and you know, meet some of you and hear your tracks and just talk shit and hang out like buddy. Yeah. If somebody drops a question in the next like minute or two, I'll do a brief response. But yeah, otherwise, thanks heaps for coming, y'all. It was pretty rad. Do I have recurring dreams? Literally pull the plug. It is right there. I could actually unplug it. I'm not gonna do that. I'm not that silly. I don't need to impress you. I have self-esteem. Do I have recurring dreams? Not really. Not for ages. How long have I been producing? I was 15. So, yeah, I was 15 and I'm 24 this year. So 9 years. 9 years of producing. I was in FL Studio for the first 5, fun fact. I switched to Ableton, yeah, like 5 years in. So I've almost been using Ableton as long as I was using FL now. I definitely prefer Ableton now, but I definitely miss some things about FL. But that's another story. Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, what's the best way to pull the plug from the wall? I find I use 2 hands and the toes on 1 foot. Just because I find rather than staying standing when you're unplugging the plug, it's better to actually just put all of your weight into the plug and fall backwards. And then by the time you hit the floor, you know that the plug is out of the wall. And if it's not, then it's supporting you and you're not falling over. You're just like sort of hanging off the plug. That's a technique. Yeah, I find, yeah, if you do that, do you go into really wild dreams where you're producing and then wake up and have an idea? I've had dreams where I've like had an idea and it sounded really sick. And I've either woken up and just like not remembered how it sounded. You just remember it being really good. Or I've just like had no idea how to make it. I've been like, what do I even do there? Fuck that question. What's better about Ableton versus FL? Most things about Ableton I like more, but I think the workflow is very different in FL because this thing here, just imagine none of these track titles are here and there's no volume outputs. It's just a big blank canvas. So no matter, like I could put this MIDI track with this drum rack, I could put this anywhere and it would sound the same. The only thing that changes is where it is in the time code. So I could put any sound anywhere, which is bad in some ways because you make a huge mess. But what I loved about it was that I could arrange things how I was thinking about them. So I was like, all right, well, the 2 most important things about this are my bass and my drums. So I'll put them at the top and then I lay some Foley down here. So you use the lanes a bit more like fluidly and a bit more artistically rather than like everything just being locked to a lane. But the only thing is it made mixing a a mess because you're like, you know, I've got this MIDI rack here, you know, it's like MIDI pattern here. Also patterns, so you can load like this drum rack could have other MIDI things in it, as like this MIDI track could have other things in it. It could have a bit of the piano on there, it could have a bit of bass in there, and it'd all just be one little MIDI clip. Because all it is just like, they're just like triggers. It's like the canvas view, the songwriting session view was just like triggers for sounds that were in another area. So a little block of MIDI is just like sending a bunch of signals everywhere. So it's just a big canvas, and you put audio in there, you put your MIDI triggers on there, and you just arrange it how you like it. And then those sounds are being triggered in like a channel editor, and then those channels are running to mixer outputs, which you then mix with and stuff. Yeah, so it's pretty, yeah, it was different. Like, I think I reckon my songwriting was probably a bit better in FL Studio because of that. But one thing I love about Ableton is how easy it is to like glue everything together, particularly like crossfading audio. I love that, and I love like the way you can like Control Alt Shift. I can just like move audio and align it perfectly, and like slicing stuff feels super good. And I can print audio straight in here, and I can route all this stuff. Like and like the rack view. Fuck, if FL Studio had a rack view like this, I feel like there's a chance I would still be using FL. Because FL Studio is limited to like 10 effects per mixer lane. That's stupid. It annoys me. You could use Patcher, but then Patcher doesn't just drag and drop like this. You have to manually plug everything into each other and stuff like that. Anyway, that's a tangent. Would you do a track, or each one of us sending you a sample we made? In a Twitch stream maybe, yeah. Yeah, jump in the Discord actually if you want to do that. I'll put a link in there now. Cool. Bang. I'm just pasting that in the chat now. That's yeah, that's the link to my Discord. Yeah. Anyway, I don't know if I should like paste social media links or something. I feel like that's just like some nice thing that you do. You just like, hey, here's my Facebook. Let's chat. You know, let's follow this up. You can find me. My name is COPYCATT with 2 T's. Just Google it, and I'm sure it'll come up. Thanks heaps for hanging out. This is a blast. Good luck with your producing. You can post questions in the Facebook page. I'll get around to it when I can. Or message on Discord. Yeah.
Sick, dude. Very fancy, very cool music. Awesome audio.
Yeah. Thanks heaps for coming.
And goodbye. I will delete.